So do you think that it's the jobs that provide meaning or the check that provides meaning? At one point in your book, for example, you specifically criticize this exact bifurcation. You basically say that there are two completely oppositional ideas, page 182, two completely oppositional ideas that many people seem to hold simultaneously. First, work is vital and the core of human experience. Second, no one will want to work if they don't have to. Well, where do you stand on that? Do you think that work is vital and people are going to work, or do you think that work is not vital and that this hole can sort of be filled by the government paying for it? So I assume that you believe work is vital. I mean, you talk a lot about it in the book, and you're opposing that to the idea that people won't work if they don't have to, but you're acknowledging a lot of people aren't going to work, right? I mean, your basic government proposals involve a lot of paying people, whether they're working or not, obviously.
With the goal that we create more work, because I'm very much in the work is vital camp, and that's not just my thinking about it, that's just in the data. Where if you look at what happens to idle men in particular, we spend a lot of time on the computer playing video games and doing other things. We volunteer less than employed men, even though we have more time. Our drinking and substance abuse tends to go up. And over time, there are some antisocial patterns that develop in idle men to a higher degree than women. And so that's just data. And so if you look at that and you say, okay, this actually is pretty consistent with my intuition that work is incredibly important and vital. It provides structure, purpose, fulfillment, meaning, social structures to people every day. And so the question is, how do we create more things like that? Now, to me, the best path to create that is to put economic resources into people's hands in the form of a freedom dividend of $1,000 a month, which would then allow more people to do the sort of work that either they want to do or that their community has a need for. And the goal is to create jobs, and putting $1,000 a month into people's hands would create at least 2 million new jobs, just because the buying power would just go right back into local businesses and communities. Now, all that being said, I do think our definition, our notion of work should evolve. And one example I use is my wife is at home. We're talking about our families. My wife is at home with our 2 young boys, one of whom is autistic. And right now, she works very hard. I mean, she works harder than I do. I mean, I'm running for president, and she's working harder. But the market values her work at zero. Society, in some ways, minimizes the value of that work. And so, to me, we should broaden the definitions of work to include being a parent or caregiver, but also arts, creativity, entrepreneurship, journalism, things that we know people, coaching, volunteering, civic engagement, things that we know people want to do more of, but that right now society will systematically either undervalue or not have any monetary value.
So I want to ask you about the location of meaning. So I've heard, as I say, I think there's a point where the populist left sort of meets the populist right. And the suggestion is that if we structure the economy in certain ways, that this will provide more jobs, and that the jobs are what are going to provide meaning. But you also suggest that, the freedom dividend, while it may create more jobs as sort of an ancillary benefit, there are a lot of people who are not going to be able to work, who are going to be on the freedom dividend, who are going to be receiving UBI. In fact, UBI studies don't show increased employment in virtually any study. At best, they show even employment or declines in employment in the areas in which they are tried. So, and then you sort of suggest that people will be able to find meaning in all the other things you're talking about, volunteering and community and art. But we're not seeing that with disability. So people are dependent on disability. They're not engaging more in art making or learning to play violin or volunteering more. They're engaging more with video games, as you talk about, or drug use, or in some cases, they become suicidal. We're seeing family breakdown with all of that. So what makes you think that the freedom dividend is going to have a different effect on human behavior than, for example, current government welfare systems have?
Yes. So 3 things. The first is that money does not somehow convey meaning. And, the best it can do is maybe provide circumstances that help people find a path towards some work that they find fulfilling. The second thing is that I have a friend whose sister is on disability, and she's afraid to volunteer in her community because she's afraid she'd be noticed as able-bodied and thus lose her benefits. And so this freedom dividend would be unconditional and free and clear, and so that person would be volunteering and would not have any fear that her benefits are going to be taken away. The third thing is that there's something very, very important about conceiving of yourself as either able or disabled. And so if you're literally getting a check for being disabled, your two ideas of yourself are, one, I'm genuinely disabled, and most people do have some kind of genuine ailment, physical or mental, or two, I'm defrauding our society and I'm actually totally fine. And I'm going to suggest that most people will fall into bucket number one, that it's like a rare person who's just like, I'm 100% fine, and this disability check I'm getting is just me being completely fabricating some condition. And so if you invert that mentality and you say, hey, you are not disabled, you are fine, you're a citizen of the richest, most advanced country in the history of the world, and you're getting this cash and it's going to be yours no matter what because it's yours and you deserve it, then that would be more constructive in terms of pushing more people into things that they'd feel good about and that society would feel good about than if we say, hey, there's something wrong with you and we're going to give you this cash in order to survive.